Emily sat in her small apartment, staring at the calendar on the wall. The red circle around the date seemed to burn into her mind. Rent was due today, and for the first time in years, she didn't have the full amount. Her heart pounded as she counted the money on the table again, as if somehow the numbers would change. They didn't. She was short, and no matter how many times she told herself it was only this once. The weight of it felt crushing. She had worked late shifts, taken extra hours, and cut back on everything she could. But last week her car broke down. Without the repair, she couldn't get to her job outside the city. She had no choice but to use the rent money. The thought of facing her landlord made her stomach twist. Daniel wasn't a bad man, not strict or cruel, but he was firm. He expected responsibility. Emily respected that about him, which made the situation even harder. A sudden knock broke through her thoughts. Her heart leaped into her throat. It was 6 o'clock, right on time. He was here. For a moment, she considered not answering. She could pretend she wasn't home by herself a little more time. But Daniel was patient. If she didn't open, he would wait. If she avoided him tonight, he would be back tomorrow. With trembling hands, she smoothed her hair and walked to the door. She opened it slowly, her breath catching when she saw him. Daniel stood tall in his dark jacket, his expression calm but unreadable. His eyes met hers, steady and searching. "Emily," he said, his voice low and even. "Do you know why I'm here?" She nodded, unable to meet his gaze. "I do, and I'm sorry. I don't want to make excuses, but this month I can't pay the full rent. I'm short, just this once. I'll make it up next month, I promise." Her words spilled out quickly, almost desperate. She hated the way her voice shook, but she couldn't stop it. Silence stretched between them. She forced herself to look up, expecting disappointment, maybe even anger. But what she found surprised her. His eyes weren't cold. They weren't even stern. They held something else, something she couldn't quite name. Daniel's jaw tightened slightly, as though he was thinking carefully before speaking. Then he said, "Let's sit down and talk about this." The request caught her off guard. She had expected him to lecture her, maybe warn her about late payments, but not this. Still, she stepped aside, letting him in. He walked into her small living room, his presence filling the quiet space. Emily followed him, her hands clasped together nervously. Daniel sat at the kitchen table, the same place where she ate her hurried meals after long shifts. She sat across from him, her pulse racing. She wanted to explain, to make him understand, but part of her feared that no explanation would be enough. She took a deep breath and began. "Last week, my car broke down. I didn't have a choice. I had to fix it or I couldn't get to work. I thought I could make up the money before rent was due, but it just didn't happen. I'm not trying to take advantage of you. I've always paid on time," says the first time her voice cracked. She stopped, pressing her lips together. The weight of her words, the shame of admitting failure, pressed down on her. Daniel didn't interrupt. He didn't rush her. He simply sat there, listening, his eyes never leaving her face. That simple act unsettled her. She was used to people cutting her off, brushing aside her worries. But here he was, silent and attentive, as if her words mattered. When she finally trailed off, she whispered, "I understand if you can't make exceptions. I needed you to know the truth." The room felt heavy with silence. Emily waited for his response, bracing herself for the worst. She expected to hear the word eviction, or at least a warning. But instead, Daniel leaned back in his chair, studying her with a look she had never seen before. "Emily," he said slowly, "do you think I don't notice? You've been here for 3 years. You've never been late, never caused trouble. I know the kind of tenant you are. You're responsible. You care. And I know people who don't. Believe me, I can tell the difference." Her eyes widened. His words sank into her, surprising her more than anything else he could have said. He wasn't just giving her grace, he was acknowledging her effort, her consistency, the quiet way she had tried to hold her life together before she could speak. He added, "Don't worry about this month's rent. It's taken care of." Emily froze. She blinked, sure she had misheard him. What? I I can't let you do that. You can, he said firmly, his gaze steady. And you will. Because I don't see this as just numbers on paper anymore. Her breath caught. The way he said it, the way he looked at her, felt different, charged with something she couldn't explain. The air between them shifted, filled with tension and something almost tender. She wanted to ask what he meant. But her words tangled in her throat. Her mind raced with questions, with fear, with hope she didn't dare admit. Daniel stood then, breaking the moment. I should go, he said, his voice steady, but softer than usual. Think about what I said. And with that, he walked to the door, leaving her in stunned silence. She didn't move, didn't speak. She just sat there, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her fingertips. When the door closed behind him, Emily leaned back in her chair, her thoughts spinning. She had expected anger, maybe disappointment. Instead, he had given her something she couldn't quite define. I don't see this as just numbers on paper anymore. The words echoed in her mind, filling the silence of the small apartment. For the first time in a long time, Emily felt like someone truly saw her, not just her mistakes, not just her struggles, but her, and that terrified her more than anything else. The days after Daniel left her apartment were restless ones for Emily. She replayed every moment of that evening in her head. The silence at the table, his steady eyes, the words he spoke before leaving. She didn't know what to make of it. He wasn't just being kind. There had been something else in his voice, something she couldn't explain. Each time she thought of his words, I don't see this as just numbers on paper anymore, her chest tightened. By the end of the week, she could no longer carry the weight of unanswered questions. She needed to see him again, needed to clear the air. She rehearsed what she would say as she waited for him one evening. When the familiar sound of his footsteps approached the hall, her courage almost failed. But then the knock came, and she opened the door before she could change her mind. Daniel stood there as always, calm and steady, but there was something gentler about his expression. She stepped aside, and without a word, he came in and sat at the same kitchen table. Emily sat across from him, gripping her hands together tightly. I want to explain, she began, her voice trembling but firm. Last week, I didn't just feel embarrassed about the rent. I felt ashamed, like I failed. I've always tried to keep everything together, and admitting I couldn't was hard for me. Daniel leaned back in his chair, his eyes never leaving her. You don't need to feel ashamed. Life happens, Emily. You've been carrying more than most people could, and you've been doing it alone. His words struck her harder than she expected. She lowered her gaze, blinking quickly. No one had said that to her before. Everyone else only saw whether she paid bills on time, whether she showed up to work, whether she looked like she had it together. Nobody had noticed the effort behind it. She looked up again. Why did you say those words? About it not being just numbers on paper? Daniel's jaw shifted slightly, and for a long moment he was quiet. Emily's heart pounded as she waited. Finally he spoke. 'Cause that's the truth. You're not just another tenant to me. I've seen how hard you work, how you keep going even when it's difficult. I've come to respect you more than you know. Her breath caught. She didn't know what to say. Respect sounded simple, but the way he said it felt deeper. He wasn't looking at her like a landlord talking to a tenant. His gaze held something else, something warmer. Something that scared her in a way that wasn't entirely unpleasant. Still, her instinct was to push back. I don't want to be seen as someone who needs saving. I'm trying to do this on my own. Daniel leaned forward, his hands folded on the table. I know you are. That's what makes you different. I don't want to take over your life. I just don't want you to think you're alone in it. Her throat tightened. The sincerity in his voice made it hard to breathe. She wanted to argue, but part of her longed for exactly what he was offering someone who saw her. Someone who cared enough to stand beside her. The silence stretched until Emily whispered, I don't know what to do with what you're saying. Daniel nodded as if he understood. You don't have to do anything right now. I just needed you to know the truth. That's all. Emily's chest ached with emotions she didn't have words for. She had walked into this conversation expecting rules, maybe conditions about her rent. Instead, she had been given something far heavier, honesty that shook the walls she had built around herself. Daniel finally stood, his chair scraping softly against the floor. He paused, watching her for a moment longer. Don't lose sleep over the rent, Emily. You've earned my trust, and that matters more to me than one payment. She rose to her feet slowly, still stunned. Daniel. Thank you. I don't know what else to say. He gave a faint smile, one that didn't quite hide the depth in his eyes. You don't have to say anything. Sometimes silence says more than words. With that, he walked toward the door. Emily followed, her pulse racing. As he reached for the handle, she wanted to stop him, to ask him to explain what was really happening between them. But her voice refused to come. The door closed softly behind him, and once again, she was left in silence. Only this time, the silence wasn't filled with fear. It was filled with a strange mixture of hope and confusion. She sat back down at the table, staring at the chair he had just left. His words replayed in her mind, "You're not alone in this," for years. She had convinced herself she had no choice but to carry everything by herself. And now, for the first time, she wondered if maybe she didn't have to. Her heart was unsettled, her thoughts racing. She didn't know what Daniel truly meant for the future. But she knew one thing: nothing between them would ever be the same either. Days after that conversation were filled with questions Emily couldn't silence. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard Daniel's words, "You're not just another tenant. You're not alone in this." They weren't the words of a landlord. They were the words of a man who saw her in a way no one else had. It unsettled her, but it also stirred something warm inside her that she had buried long ago. One evening, after a long shift, Emily felt restless. The walls of her small apartment pressed in on her, heavy with thoughts she couldn't shake. She pulled on a sweater and stepped outside for a walk. The air was cool, and the streets were quiet under the glow of the street lamps. She hoped the movement would calm her racing mind. She hadn't expected to see him. But there he was, Daniel leaning against the fence near the property, his posture relaxed but his gaze thoughtful. When he noticed her, his lips curved slightly. "Evening," he said. His voice was softer than usual, almost uncertain. "Hi," Emily replied, surprised but oddly relieved. For reasons she couldn't explain, she felt safer seeing him there. They began walking slowly down the street, their steps falling in rhythm. At first the silence between them was heavy, but soon it felt natural, almost comfortable. It wasn't the silence of strangers, it was the silence of two people who didn't need to fill every moment with words. Eventually, Daniel broke it. "How are you holding up?" Emily hesitated, then answered honestly. "I'm trying. Some days feel harder than others, but I'm still standing." He gave a small nod. "I can see that. You're stronger than you give yourself credit for." She glanced at him, caught off guard. "What makes you say that?" Daniel looked straight ahead, his hands in his pockets. "Because most people in your situation would have given up or complained or expected someone else to fix things. You keep pushing forward. That says a lot about you." Her chest tightened at his words. No one had ever spoken to her that way. People usually saw her struggles as weaknesses. But Daniel seemed to see her resilience instead. For a moment, she let herself imagine what it would be like if someone truly believed in her. Someone who didn't see her as a burden or a responsibility, but as a woman capable of more than survival. The conversation shifted as they walked further. He asked about her dreams, things she hadn't thought about in years. Hesitantly, she admitted she used to love painting, that she once dreamed of having a small art studio where she could teach kids. She laughed quietly as she spoke, almost embarrassed. "It sounds silly now. I barely make enough to keep the lights on." Dreams feel. Far away, Daniel's gaze softened as he looked at her. "That's not silly at all. It's real. And it's still a part of you, even if you've buried it under everything else." You're more than your bills, Emily. You're more than your struggles. His words pierced straight through her. She hadn't let herself believe that in years. And now, hearing it from him made her feel seen in a way she didn't know she needed. The street grew quieter as they walked further from the main road. The night air wrapped around them, and the only sound was the steady rhythm of their footsteps. Emily felt her heart beating faster, not from fear, but from the closeness that had formed between them. Daniel slowed his pace and finally stopped under the glow of a lamppost. He turned to her, his expression serious but gentle. "There's something I need to tell you." Emily froze. The way he said it sent a wave of nerves through her. His eyes held hers, and in that moment, the world seemed to stand still. "I wasn't completely honest with you the other day," he continued, his voice steady. "When I said I let the rent go because I respected you, that was true. But it wasn't the whole truth." Emily's breath caught in her throat. She couldn't look away from him, even though part of her wanted to. Her heart raced with both fear and anticipation. Daniel took a slow breath as though weighing every word. "The real reason I did it is because I care about you. More than I should. I've tried to ignore it to keep things professional, but I can't anymore. I see you, Emily, not just as someone who rents from me, not just as someone struggling to get by. I see you." Her chest tightened painfully. She hadn't expected this, not from him, not from anyone. The honesty in his voice left no room for doubt. He wasn't playing games, and he wasn't saying this out of pity. Daniel," she whispered, her voice breaking. "This is complicated." "I know," he admitted softly. "But life is already complicated. The truth is simple. I don't want you to feel alone anymore." Tears stung her eyes. She turned her face slightly, afraid of what he might see there. For years, she had carried her burdens in silence, convinced she had no choice. And now here was someone offering to stand beside her. Not because he had to, but because he wanted to. Her voice trembled when she finally spoke. "I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything tonight," Daniel replied, his tone calm and sure. "Just let yourself believe you deserve more than just surviving." The street was quiet around them, the light casting soft shadows across his face. Emily felt like the moment was too fragile to break, too powerful to run from. Something inside her shifted, something she thought had been lost long ago, for the first time in years. She felt not as someone who owed rent, not as someone barely keeping her head above water, but as a woman worth caring for. Her world, which had felt small and heavy for so long, suddenly felt open in a way that scared her and gave her hope all at once. And as they stood there, under the dim light of the lamppost, Emily realized that nothing about her life was going to be the same again. Emily barely slept that night. The walk, the way Daniel had spoken, the honesty in his eyes, it all replayed over and over. She had gone out for air, hoping to clear her mind, but instead, she had come back with more questions than ever. His words had shaken her, not because she doubted them, but because she felt them too. Deep down, she had sensed something between them for months, maybe years, but she had buried it under fear. Under practicality, under the thought that a man like him would never look at her that way. The next morning, she tried to distract herself with chores, with work, with anything that would keep her mind from wandering back to him. But even in the middle of the crowded cafe where she worked, she caught herself remembering the way he had said, "I don't want you to feel alone anymore." Those words clung to her like a thread she couldn't untangle. When evening came, another knock sounded at her door. Her heart leaped. She knew it was him. She hesitated, her hand hovering above the knob. But then she opened it. Daniel stood there, not in his usual jacket, but in a simple shirt. His posture less formal than usual. His expression was serious, but there was a softness in his eyes. "Can we talk?" He asked that. Emily nodded and let him in. He didn't go to the kitchen table this time. Instead, he stopped in the middle of the small living room, turning to face her. She stood near the couch, her arms crossed lightly, her nerves buzzing. Daniel took a slow breath. "I want to be completely honest with you. The other night, I told you I care about you. That hasn't changed. In fact, it's stronger than I thought. But I also know this isn't simple. You're my tenant. I didn't want to blur that line, but pretending hasn't worked either. So, here it is. I don't see you as just someone renting an apartment. I see you as someone I want to know, someone I want to stand beside. Emily's throat tightened. Her first instinct was to resist, to protect herself. Daniel, you don't understand. I've been on my own for so long. I don't know how to let someone in without worrying it will all fall apart. His gaze didn't waver. Then let it be messy. Let it be slow. I'm not asking you to figure everything out right now. I just want you to know my feelings are real. You don't owe me anything back. I only want you to believe that someone truly sees you. Her eyes burned with tears she had been holding back for years. She turned slightly, brushing them away, embarrassed by her own vulnerability. But Daniel stepped closer, not invading her space, but closing the distance enough that she could feel the weight of his presence. You've been strong for so long, he said softly. You don't always have to be. That broke something inside her. A sob rose in her chest, quiet but unstoppable. She covered her face, and for a moment she hated how exposed she felt. But instead of pulling away, Daniel waited, steady and patient, as if giving her permission to feel everything she had hidden when she finally lowered her hands. He was still there, watching her with a tenderness that made her heart ache. You really mean this, don't you? She whispered. I do, he said simply. The silence stretched, but it wasn't heavy. It was full, thick with something new and fragile. Emily let out a shaky laugh. I don't even know where to start. Daniel gave a faint smile. Then we start small, one step at a time. He didn't push further, didn't demand an answer. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He handed it to her. I was going to wait, but I think now is the right time. Confused, Emily opened it. Inside was a sketch of building with wide windows, little sign above the door, and children painted inside with brushes in hand. Her breath caught. It's a rough drawing, Daniel said quickly, almost shy. But I thought, maybe one day it could be your studio. I know it's just a dream right now, but I wanted you to see it's not impossible. Tears blurred her vision again. She pressed the paper to her chest, overwhelmed. No one had ever cared enough to imagine her dreams with her. No one had ever said, you can. Until now. She looked at him, her voice breaking. Why would you do this for me? Because, Daniel said, his tone steady but full of warmth, you deserve someone who believes in you. And I want to be that person. For a long moment, Emily couldn't speak. Her heart felt too full. The fear was still there, the uncertainty of what this could mean for them, but alongside it was something stronger, hope. Real hope. She stepped closer, holding the paper tightly in her hands. I don't know where this is going, Daniel, but maybe I don't need to know right now. His eyes softened even more. That's enough for me. They stood there in the quiet of her small living room, the weight of unspoken feelings hanging between them. Nothing had been decided, nothing was promised, but the shift had already happened. Rent had brought them together in a way neither of them expected. But what grew from that moment was something far deeper than money or obligations. For the first time in years, Emily didn't feel like she was just surviving. She felt like she was standing at the beginning of something new, something fragile but full of possibility, and that more than anything else was the true surprise her landlord had given her. Not forgiveness for the rent, not even kindness, but the chance to believe in herself again. The chance to believe in love.